I'm Ellie, and I used to live by myself in a house in the woods. It was a rickety old cabin, nestled deep in the forests of northern Oregon, surrounded by towering pines and a silence so thick it could swallow you whole. I moved there 2 years ago, desperate for a fresh start after a brutal breakup left me hollow. The city noise, the crowded streets, it was all too much. I wanted peace, solitude, a place where I could hear my own thoughts again. So I packed my bags, grabbed my cat Luna, and drove until the pavement turned to gravel, then dirt, then nothing but trees. The cabin was perfect at first. It sat on a small clearing with a sagging porch, chipped green paint, and windows that rattled in the wind. Inside, it smelled of damp wood and moss, but I didn't care. I had my books, my sketch pads, and Luna purring at my feet. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the closest town, Pine Hollow, was a 30-minute drive down winding roads. It was just me, the forest, and the quiet I'd craved. But that quiet didn't last. It started small. A few weeks in, I'd wake up to faint tapping sounds, like branches brushing the roof, but the trees were too far from the cabin to reach it. I'd stumble outside in my slippers, flashlight shaking in my hand, scanning the dark. Nothing. Just the wind weaving through the pines, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. I told myself it was the forest settling, or maybe an animal scurrying around. But deep down, a knot tightened in my stomach. Something felt off. Then the footprints appeared. One morning, while brewing coffee, I glanced out the kitchen window and froze. There, in the soft mud near the porch, were boot prints. Big, heavy ones with deep treads that didn't match my sneakers. My heart thudded against my ribs as I stepped outside, the cold air biting my skin. The prints circled the house, stopping at each window, like someone had stood there, peering in. I grabbed a broom and swept them away, my hands trembling, telling myself it was a hiker who'd gotten lost. But hikers don't circle houses in the dead of night. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At night, I'd sit by the fireplace, sketching to calm my nerves, but every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Luna started acting strange too. Her ears would flatten, and she'd hiss at the windows, her yellow eyes locked on something I couldn't see. I'd pull the curtains tight, but the unease gnawed at me, a splinter I couldn't dig out. One evening, after a long day sketching by the creek, I came home to find the back door ajar. I stopped dead, my keys slipping from my fingers and clattering onto the porch. I never left it unlocked. Never. My pulse raced as I pushed the door open with my foot, clutching a stick I'd grabbed from the ground. The kitchen was a mess. Drawers yanked open, a loaf of bread torn apart on the counter, and muddy smudges streaking the floor. Luna darted out from under the table, yowling, her fur puffed up like a storm cloud. Someone had been inside. I called the sheriff, my voice shaking as I explained. Deputy Harris, a gruff man with a graying beard, arrived an hour later, his flashlight cutting through the dusk. He poked around, frowning at the mud and the door. "Could be a vagrant," he said, scratching his chin. "Folks sometimes wander out here, looking for shelter. I'll keep an eye out, but you should get a lock for that door." He left me with a flimsy promise and a business card, but his words didn't ease the terror clawing at my chest. I bought a deadbolt the next day, drove to Pine Hollow in a daze, and installed it with trembling hands. I also ordered a cheap security camera online, motion-activated, with night vision. If someone was out there, I'd catch them. That night, I barely slept, my ears straining for every sound. The wind howled. Branches scraped the roof, and I swore I heard footsteps crunching outside. I clutched a kitchen knife under my pillow. Luna curled tight against me, her warmth the only thing keeping me sane. The camera arrived a week later, and I set it up on the porch, aiming it at the yard. For a few days, nothing happened, just footage of deer and raccoons sniffing around. I started to relax, convincing myself it was over. Then, on a rainy Tuesday night, the camera's app pinged my phone. I jolted upright, fumbling to open it, my breath catching as the screen loaded. There, in grainy black and white, was a man. He was tall, lanky, with a hood pulled low over his face. He stood at the edge of the clearing, motionless, staring straight at the cabin. My stomach dropped as he took a step forward, then another, his boots sinking into the mud. He stopped at the porch, tilting his head like he was listening, then reached out and ran a gloved hand along the railing. I watched, frozen, as he circled the house, pausing at each window, his hooded figure a shadow against the glass. When he disappeared into the trees, I realized I'd been holding my breath so long, my lungs burned. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, knife in one hand, phone in the other, replaying the footage until my eyes stung. Who was he? What did he want? The next day, I drove to the sheriff's office, shoving my phone at Deputy Harris. He squinted at the screen, his jaw tightening. "Looks like trouble," he muttered. "We'll patrol the area tonight. Stay put, lock up tight." That night, I barricaded myself in. I dragged a dresser against the back door, double-checked the locks, and kept the lights off, hoping darkness would hide me. Luna paced the room, her tail flicking nervously. Around midnight, the camera pinged again. My heart sank as I opened the app. He was back. This time, he was closer, standing right at the back door, his hooded face inches from the lens. I could see his breath, fogging in the cold, his gloved hands tugging at the handle. The deadbolt held, but the door rattled under his grip. Then he turned, looking straight into the camera, and I swear I saw a flash of teeth, a grin, before he stepped back and vanished into the woods. I called Harris, my voice a panicked whisper. "He's here. He's trying to get in." 30 agonizing minutes later, headlights pierced the darkness as his patrol car rolled up. I watched from the window as he swept the yard with his flashlight, shouting into the trees. Nothing. No sign of the man. Harris knocked on my door, his face grim. "Found some tracks heading west," he said. "We'll keep looking. You okay staying here?" "No," I snapped, my voice cracking. "I'm not okay." But I had nowhere else to go. He left, promising to check in, and I sank to the floor, hugging Luna, tears streaming down my face. I felt trapped, a mouse in a cage with a cat circling outside. The next night was the worst. I'd barely closed my eyes when a loud thud shook the cabin. I bolted upright, clutching the knife, my pulse roaring in my ears. The camera pinged, multiple alerts this time. I opened it and saw him again, but now he was at the front window, pressing his hands against the glass. His hood slipped back just enough to reveal a gaunt face, pale and hollow, with eyes that glinted like a predator's in the dark. He tapped the window with a finger, slow and deliberate, each tap echoing in my skull. I grabbed my phone to call Harris, but before I could dial, the tapping stopped. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Then I heard it, a low, guttural laugh from outside, chilling me to marrow. I crept to the window, peering through a crack in the curtains. He was gone, but on the porch, Scratched into the wood with something sharp were the words, "I see you." I couldn't take it anymore. I screamed for Harris, my voice raw, and he arrived with another deputy, guns drawn. They combed the woods, shouting into the night, and after what felt like hours, they dragged a man out of the trees. He was filthy, wild-haired, wearing the same hooded jacket from the footage. He didn't fight, just stared at me through the car window as they cuffed him, his lips curling into that same sick grin. Harris told me later they'd found a makeshift camp half a mile away, tattered blankets, empty cans, and a knife with a notched blade. The man wouldn't talk, wouldn't say why he'd targeted me. Probably a drifter, Harris said. "We've got him now. You're safe." Safe. That word felt like a lie. I stayed one more night, but every shadow, every rustle made me flinch. Luna wouldn't leave my side, her eyes darting to the windows. I packed my things the next morning, hands shaking as I tossed clothes into bags. I couldn't stay. Not with those words carved into my porch. Not with the echo of his laugh still ringing in my ears. I left the cabin behind, moving to a cramped apartment in Pine Hollow. The forest was supposed to be my sanctuary, but it became my nightmare. Even now, in the hum of town, I check my locks 3 times a night. I see his face in my dreams, those glinting eyes, that grin, and I wonder if he's really gone, or if he's still out there, watching from the woods, waiting for me to come back.